Welcome to another deep dive. Looks like we got some really interesting stuff from Linux Basics for Hackers this time. Definitely plays into what you all seem to be into right now with ethical hacking and all that.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like you're really interested in getting a better grasp of the tools and techniques, the kind of stuff both sides use, really. And this book jumps right into that, showing how the good guys and the bad guys use them.
The hands-on tutorials are what really jumped out at me, I gotta say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like actually writing scripts to scan networks, even making your own hacking tools. It's pretty wild. Plus, it goes into staying anonymous online with Tor and VPNs, things like that.
That's cool. What I find fascinating is how this book doesn't just, throw tools at you and say good luck. It really wants you to understand the why, the systems behind it all.
Right. Yeah.
Like, to be a truly great ethical hacker, a solid foundation in Linux is non-negotiable.
It's saying Linux is the operating system, basically, for cybersecurity. I mean, it even says over 90% of hacking tools are written for Linux. What is it about Linux that makes it so dominant in this field?
Well, it comes down to control, the kind you just don't get with other operating systems. Like, you can directly interact with the kernel, the heart of the OS.
Oh, okay.
And that makes it perfect for developing and using these really powerful tools.
So it's that granular control that draws people to Linux then?
Yeah, exactly. And plus, don't forget, it's open source.
Yeah.
Anyone can look at the code, change it, build on it, like a giant collaborative project, kinda. And that's huge for the hacking community. They've embraced Linux big time.
Now, the book also talks about different paths you can take with ethical hacking, like penetration testing for security firms, even working for government agencies.
Right, right.
Both are hacking, but with good intentions, I guess.
Yeah. It's an important distinction, for sure. Companies hire penetration testers to find weaknesses before the bad guys do. Like, they might come in after a vulnerability assessment and see if they can actually exploit those weaknesses.
So it's like a controlled breach, right?
Yeah.
To find the weak points and fix them before someone with less noble goals finds them.
Exactly. And on the government side, those ethical hackers, they're crucial for national security, protecting our infrastructure and defending against attacks.
High-stakes stuff, for
Yeah.
sure. Now, there's this thing called Kali Linux that the book mentions. It sounds like a hacker's dream OS, kind of. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's based on Debian Linux, and it comes preloaded with hundreds of hacking tools.
Wow.
So, yeah, security professionals get a huge head start with Kali.
So you can just dive right in?
Basically, yeah. And for beginners, the book suggests running Kali on a virtual machine, a safe space to practice without risking your main computer, like a sandbox for hackers, if you will.
Definitely a smart move. The book also really stresses mastering the command line, starting with the fundamentals like navigating the file system, moving files, all that good stuff.
Yeah, the command line's where the real power of Linux lies. Might seem daunting at first, but it's way more efficient than a graphical interface, especially for complex tasks.
Right.
The book really highlights this one command, find. It's like a superpower search engine for your computer. Find specific files, even in a huge directory structure. Imagine trying to search through thousands of files and folders manually.
Oh, that'd be a nightmare. So mastering these commands, it's like having a secret weapon in the cybersecurity world.
Absolutely. But it's not just about files. You can manipulate the network, analyze connections, even disguise your device's identity on the network.
Wait, so you can make your device look different on the network?
Yeah. The book gives this example of spoofing your MA address using the ifconfig command, like changing your car's license plate. You look different to the network, but of course, in the wrong hands.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It can be used for bad stuff, too.
That's a great analogy. It makes sense for security testing, making sure the network's doing its job. But yeah, it makes you realize this knowledge can be misused, too.
Exactly. That's why the ethical side of this is crucial, using this knowledge responsibly.
Now, the book also gets into managing software on Linux, installing and removing programs, using something called the apt-get package manager.
Right. That's specific to Debian-based systems like Kali.
Okay.
And it really stresses keeping your software up to date, especially for security. Outdated softwares like leaving your front door wide open.
Makes sense.
Hackers are just waiting to exploit those known vulnerabilities.
Now, the book also mentions these third-party software repositories. What are those all about?
Well, sometimes you need tools that aren't in the default Kali repositories. These third-party ones offer a wider range, but you got to be careful. Make sure they're trustworthy before you add them.
Right. You don't want to accidentally install something bad. So it's like downloading software online. Be cautious.
especially in the cybersecurity world.
For sure. Now, from there, the book goes into file and directory permissions.
Yeah.
That's all about who has access to what on your system, right?
Right. Linux has this super granular permission system, so you can actually control who can read, write, or execute each file. Sounds complicated, but the book explains it really well.
Okay, so it's all about security layers, basically,
Hmm.
making sure only authorized users can get to sensitive information.
Yeah, exactly. The book even talks about this command umask for setting more secure defaults, like setting the bar higher from the start.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
The book also covers something called process management in Linux.
Hmm.
So being able to see what's running on your system in real time, that's key for spotting any malicious activity, right?
Absolutely. Imagine being able to see everything happening on your computer. That's what process management tools do. The book introduces eyes and top essential commands for understanding what's going on behind the scenes.
Right, right.
It even talks about the kill command. You can use that to stop or restart processes. Super handy for rogue processes or malware.
Oh, wow. But that sounds like a powerful command. You got to be careful with that one, right?
Oh, definitely. You got to understand the different signals it sends because they have different effects on the process.
So it's more like a scalpel than a sledgehammer.
Exactly. You got to be precise with it.
Okay, this is getting really interesting. Now, what about this bash scripting stuff? The book says it's for automating tasks. Even includes an example for scanning open ports on a network.
Oh, bash scripting is like having a personal assistant for your computer, automates all those boring, repetitive tasks.
Oh, okay.
And in this case, they show you how to make a basic network scanner. It uses this command, man map, which is popular for exploring networks and auditing security.
So you could set this script to run automatically, and it would scan for open ports, which could be entry points for hackers.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg with bash scripting. Really powerful tool, both in cybersecurity and beyond.
Now let's get into this whole staying hidden online thing. The book really dives into that, this whole world of anonymity. Kind of feels like privacy is getting harder and harder to maintain these days.
Oh, it really is. And this book, it gives you a glimpse into what people are doing to stay hidden. The ethical hackers and, well, the not so ethical ones too. It talks about Tor, proxy servers, VPNs, even encrypted email.
Tor, that's the one everyone always associates with, like the dark web and all that,
Yeah.
right? How does that even work?
Yeah, so Tor routes your internet traffic through all these relays all over the world, so it makes it really hard to trace it back to you, like bouncing a signal off a ton of mirrors.
Right, right.
Hard to tell where it came from originally.
But even Tor has its limits, right?
Yeah.
The book mentions stuff like government surveillance, ways to analyze traffic patterns, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. You're not completely invisible, even with Tor. It's like wearing a disguise. You might look different, but someone who's really looking for you can still recognize you.
True anonymity is probably impossible then.
It probably is, yeah. But Tor can still be really useful for protecting your privacy, especially if you're dealing with sensitive stuff or if you're in a risky situation.
Makes sense. So it's all about weighing the risks and benefits then, choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly. The book also talks about these things called proxy servers. They act like a middleman between you and the internet.
Okay.
So your traffic looks like it's coming from the proxy server, not your computer.
So it's like hiding your real location.
Exactly. And that's useful for a lot of reasons. Bypassing censorship, accessing content that's blocked in your region, even protecting your identity.
Makes sense. But are there downsides to using a proxy?
Well, yeah, the proxy server owner can still see that you're doing. They could log your activity or even give up your information if they're forced to.
So you're really putting a lot of trust in the proxy provider then?
You are, yeah, like telling someone a secret. You hope they don't tell anyone, but you never really know for sure.
That's a good way to put it. So then what about VPNs? Everyone seems to be using those these days for privacy and security.
Yeah, VPNs are getting really popular. They encrypt your traffic and send it through this secure tunnel to a remote server. So you're not only hiding your IP address, you're protecting your data from snooping, which is especially important on public Wi-Fi.
So it's like having your own private encrypted connection, even if you're on public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sounds way more secure than a proxy server.
Generally, yeah. But you still have to choose a good VPN provider, one with a strong privacy policy. You're trusting them with your online activity.
Right.
Got to make sure you can actually trust them.
Yeah, choosing the right VPN provider, that's got to be crucial.
Yeah, it's like picking a bodyguard, and you want someone who's going to protect you, not exploit you.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Now, what about encrypted email? I've been meaning to look into that.
Oh, yeah. Well, encrypted email services use strong encryption to keep your messages safe. Nobody can snoop on what you're sending or receiving. The book mentions Proton Mail. That's a popular one.
I've heard of that one. They're big on privacy, right? End-to-end encryption and all that.
Yeah, exactly. End-to-end means that only you and the person you're talking to have the keys to decrypt the messages. Even the email provider can't read them.
So it's like putting your message in a locked box.
Yeah.
And only you and the recipient have the key.
Exactly. And that can be super important if you're dealing with sensitive or confidential info.
So we've got Tor, proxy servers, VPNs, encrypted email. Lots of different ways to protect our privacy online. Sounds like there are a lot of options.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, really. It's about knowing the risks and benefits of each approach, picking the right tools for the situation, being aware of the limitations.
It's a balancing act.
It is. That's just the reality of cybersecurity and privacy in the digital age, I guess.
Now, the book also talks about wireless hacking. I feel like people don't always think about wireless networks when it comes to security, but they can be just as vulnerable, right?
Oh, yeah, if not more so. I mean, those signals are just being broadcast through the air, right?
Right.
Much easier to intercept than data traveling through a cable.
Makes sense. So the book dives into all that, starting with the basics of how wireless networks work. ESIDs, BSIDs, channels, encryption protocols, all that stuff.
Yep, lays the groundwork. Got to understand how those networks work if you want to attack or defend them.
Then it gets into this tool, arrow dumping. You can use that to capture wireless traffic.
Arrow dumping, that's part of the air cracking suite, a popular toolkit for wireless security auditing.
Right.
With arrow dumping, you can do things like capture packets, find hidden networks, even gather the info you need to crack Wi-Fi passwords.
Wow.
Yeah, the book gives a whole example of how you'd use arrow dumping to collect info about a network, like MSC addresses of connected devices, signal strength, the type of encryption, even the ESC, which is just the network name.
That's a lot of sensitive information. What could someone even do with all that data?
Well, they could use it to launch more attacks, disconnect devices, try to crack the Wi-Fi password.
Speaking of cracking passwords, the book goes into that too. Uses tools like air cracking and word lists.
Word lists, those are just dictionaries of common passwords.
Right.
Hackers use them to try to guess passwords. It's a brute force approach, but it works surprisingly well.
That's a bit unnerving. Makes you realize how important it is to have a strong, unique password.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And enable two-factor authentication whenever you can.
For sure. Now, the book also touches on Bluetooth hacking. I've never really thought about that much. Are Bluetooth devices really that vulnerable?
You'd be surprised. They're often overlooked, but they can be just as vulnerable as any other wireless device. The book explains how Bluetooth devices pair with each other, all about link keys and service discovery. It gives you a basic understanding so you can see where the weaknesses are.
Okay.
And then, of course, it introduces tools for Bluetooth hacking. Config for managing the Bluetooth interface, Tool for scanning for nearby devices, TP tool for figuring out what services those devices offer.
So a hacker could potentially use these tools to find devices, see if there are vulnerabilities, and even try to gain access.
Exactly. And they even mention a tool called Ixodump, which can be used to sniff Bluetooth traffic, capture the data being sent between devices.
So they could be intercepting passwords, credit card numbers, even conversations. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. It's a reminder that wireless security isn't just about Wi-Fi.
Right. Got to think about all those different wireless technologies.
Yeah, any wireless communication can be exploited if you're not careful.
So getting back to Linux itself, the book dives deeper into the operating system, right into the Linux kernel.
The kernel. That's the heart of the OS. It manages the system's resources, talks to the hardware, provides all the essential services to the programs running on your computer.
And the book focuses on these things called loadable kernel modules.
LBM.
Yeah.
They're a really cool feature of Linux. They let you add functionality to the kernel without having to rebuild the whole thing, like adding an expansion pack to a video game.
Oh, okay. I get it. But is there a downside to that?
There can be, yeah. LKMs are great for adding functionality, but they can also be a security risk.
No, so.
Remember when we talked about rootkits?
Yeah.
Well, LKMs can be exploited to install those.
So it's a trade-off then. More functionality, but also a potential risk.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that it's super important to understand the security implications, especially for system administrators. They got to be aware of the risks and protect their systems.
Knowledge is power, but it comes with responsibility, right?
Right on. The book goes through how to check your kernel version, lists the modules that are loaded, and even how to add and remove modules. Uses commands like modprobe.
Okay.
It gives you a hands-on understanding of how LKMs work, how to manage them.
So you're not just reading about it, you're actually doing it.
Exactly. And they even use the example of installing a video card driver to show how LKMs are used in everyday stuff.
Right?
But then they point out how that same process could be abused to install malicious code.
Wait, so a hacker could make a bad LKM that looks like a legitimate driver?
Yeah. Trick someone into installing it, and bam, they've got access to the kernel.
That's a scary thought. Even something as simple as installing a driver can be dangerous.
It can, yeah. Good reminder to always be thinking about security.
Definitely.
What?
So moving on, the book covers task scheduling using this cron tab command.
Cron tab, that's how you automate stuff in Linux. Schedule backups, updates, any routine task you want to run automatically.
Sounds useful.
Super useful for sysadmins, but guess what? Hackers can abuse cron tab too.
Oh, of course they can.
Yeah, they can schedule their malicious activities to run at a specific time, like when nobody's watching.
Sneaky. So the book explains all this.
Oh yeah, it goes through the format of the cron tab file, shows you how to schedule tasks to run at specific times and dates, even covers shortcuts like at daily or at reboot.
So it's a powerful tool, but it can be used for both good and bad, just like pretty much everything else we've talked about.
Pretty much, yeah. Understanding how it works is important for defending against attacks and for understanding how those attacks might happen.
Now let's talk about Python scripting. The book spends a lot of time on that. Python seems to be really popular for hackers. Why is that?
Well, it's versatile, easy to learn, and there are tons of libraries and modules for just about anything you want to do. It's like the Swiss Army knife of programming languages.
So you can really do just about anything with it.
Yeah, pretty much. The book starts with the basics like variables, data types, comments, functions, all that. It gives you a good foundation.
Yeah.
It even covers object-oriented programming in Python, which is a bit more advanced, but really important these days.
Object-oriented programming, what's that all about?
Basically, it lets you create reusable modules of code, makes development faster and more organized.
So even if you're building hacking tools, you still want to use good coding practices.
Oh, absolutely. Well-written code is reliable code no matter what you're doing.
Makes sense. So the book talks about using Python for network stuff, right?
Yep, it introduces the socket module. You can use that to create network connections, send and receive data.
Oh, okay.
It's the foundation for all sorts of network programming in Python.
So like how would a hacker use this for, I don't know, reconnaissance or something?
Well, the book actually shows you how to build a simple TCP client in Python.
Okay.
You can use that to connect to a remote server and grab banner information.
Banner grabbing, that's where you try to get information about a system, right? Like the operating system, versions of services, stuff like that.
Exactly. And Python makes it easy to automate that process, which is why it's so popular for reconnaissance.
Interesting.
And it doesn't stop there. They show you how to build a TCP server too.
What's the difference between a client and a server?
So the client, that's what initiates the connection. The server just sits there and waits for connections to come in.
Ah, okay. So like if I'm browsing a website, my browser is the client and the website is the server.
Exactly. And the book gives you code examples for both so you can see how network programming works in Python. Great foundation for building more complex tools.
Now, I know you like Python, but the book does mention some limitations, right? Like with performance and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Python can be a bit slower than some other languages like C or C++, comma. So for certain hacking tools, especially ones that need to interact with low-level system components, it might not be the best choice.
So it's not a silver bullet, but it's a good all-arounder for a lot of tasks.
Exactly.
Now, let's get to the really interesting part, building actual hacking tools. The book starts with a banner grabber, like we talked about, but this time it shows you how to make a more advanced one using Python.
Oh, cool.
Error handling, user input, all that good stuff. Then it gets into an FTP password cracker.
Password cracking, that sounds a bit, I don't know, shady, even for ethical hacking.
Yeah, it can be. But the book really stresses the importance of doing it ethically. Only targeting systems you have permission to test. It's about improving security, not causing harm.
Makes sense. So how does this FTP password cracker even work?
Well, the book walks you through it step by step. Uses the ftplib module to interact with FTP servers, covers error handling, all that.
Okay.
It's a good example of how you can use Python to build powerful tools, even if you're not a hardcore programmer.
And it ties back to that whole ethical hacking idea, using your skills for good.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from networking and wireless security to actually building hacking tools. It's a pretty comprehensive intro to cybersecurity, really.
Yeah, it is. And it drives home that message that knowing how hacking works is the best way to defend against it.
Being proactive, right?
Exactly. Anticipating those attacks, building those strong defenses.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly.
We've spent the last couple deep dives really getting into Linux basics for hackers, uncovering a ton about cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and just how powerful Linux is as an operating system.
It's been pretty intense, right?
It has. I mean, we've gone from basic command line stuff to like network manipulation, even scripting with Bash and Python.
Oh, yeah. Definitely covered a lot of ground.
We have. But before we finish up, I think it's good to step back and think about what we've learned. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
This book is not just a technical manual. It's more like a look inside the cybersecurity world.
Right.
Knowledge can be used for good or bad. Those lines can get blurry, and the stakes are high, really high.
No doubt.
One of the biggest takeaways for me is how much it stresses understanding the why behind everything. It's not just about memorizing commands or knowing how to exploit some vulnerability.
Right.
It's about getting those deeper concepts, the system architecture, even the psychology of hackers, both the good guys and the bad guys.
Yeah, it's about that deeper understanding, separating the pros from the amateurs.
Right, exactly. It's the difference between someone who could just run a downloaded script and someone who can write their own tools, adapt to new challenges, you know.
For sure. And the book also really emphasizes being proactive about security.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
It's not about waiting for an attack and then trying to fix it.
Right.
It's about knowing how hacking works, finding those weaknesses before they get exploited, and building strong defenses.
It's like having a security system in place from the start, not waiting till after your house gets robbed to install one, right?
Exactly. A perfect analogy. And speaking of defenses, the book makes it super clear Linux is king when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely.
That open source nature, the control it gives you, the huge community and all the tools, it's the platform everyone uses, security pros and, well, malicious hackers too.
Right. And as technology keeps advancing, with cloud computing, the Internet of Things, all that stuff, Linux is only going to get more important in the cybersecurity world.
For sure.
The book also emphasizes staying anonymous online, which feels super important these days.
Oh, absolutely.
Mass surveillance, data breaches, identity theft. Protecting our privacy is a real challenge.
It is.
And the book gives us all these different ways to do it. Tor, proxy servers, VPNs, encrypted email. They're all powerful tools for protecting ourselves online.
Right. But it's important to remember there's no magic bullet.
Right.
No single solution guarantees anonymity.
Yeah.
Each approach has its own pros and cons, risks and limitations.
It's about knowing those trade-offs, right? Choosing the right tool, layering those security measures for the best protection.
Exactly. It's like building a fortress. You need multiple layers of defense.
That's a good way to put it. Another thing that really stood out to me was how everyday actions can have big security implications.
Oh, for sure.
Installing a driver, scheduling a task to run automatically, things like that. They seem harmless, but they can be exploited.
Oh, yeah. Those are the things attackers look for, those little openings.
Right. They can get access, install malware, even take over a whole system. It reminds us to be careful, to be security conscious with everything we do online.
Always be thinking about the risks.
Right. And the book also really hits on the ethical side of all this.
Which is so important for sure.
It emphasizes getting permission before you test anything.
Yeah.
Respecting people's privacy, using these tools responsibly.
Yeah, that's what ethical hacking is all about.
It's a noble pursuit, but it comes with responsibility. You're using your knowledge to make things safer, not to cause harm. It's like being a superhero.
Oh, I like that. You've got the powers, but you got to use them for good.
Exactly. This whole deep dive into Linux basics for hackers, it's given us a real look into the world of cybersecurity, this complex, constantly changing world.
And it's a world full of challenges and opportunities, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. And in this world, knowledge really is power.
Couldn't agree more.
Whether you're thinking about a career in cybersecurity or just want to be a more informed and safer computer user, this book is a great place to start.
Definitely.
It reminds us that we all have a responsibility to protect ourselves and each other in this digital world.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been awesome exploring this book with you. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always,